You've met this guy. He drives a 10-year-old Camry. His house is modest, not small, just nothing that stands out. He doesn't talk about his portfolio at dinner. He doesn't bring up his lake house unless you ask, and if you do ask, he kind of shrugs it off and changes the subject. You figure he's doing all right. Average, maybe comfortable. Then one day, completely by accident, you find out he retired at 58, has zero debt, and hasn't touched his principal in 6 years. He wasn't hiding it. He just didn't need you to know. And here's what nobody tells you. That's the pattern, not the exception, the rule. Across hundreds of wealthy retirees studied by behavioral economists and financial planners, the one thing that shows up over and over again isn't strategy, it's psychology, specifically detachment. Over the next 18 minutes, you're going to see exactly what that detachment looks like, where it comes from, and more importantly, why it protects wealth in a way no stock pick ever could. If you're within 15 years of retirement and you've ever felt that pull to show you've made it, this is for you. And if you haven't felt it yet, stick around because that pressure's coming. Let me give you permission to think about something a little uncomfortable. Most of us grew up in a world where visible success meant safety. A nice car meant you had your life together. A big house meant you were winning. Brand names, vacations, restaurants, those weren't just preferences, they were signals. Signals to your neighbors, your family, old coworkers. Signals that said, I made it, I'm okay, you can trust me, and that wiring runs deeper than you think. Back in 1899, a sociologist named Thorstein Veblen wrote a book called The Theory of the Leisure Class. That's where the idea of conspicuous consumption comes from. The concept was simple. People don't just buy things because they need them. They buy things to signal status. And the higher the price tag, the louder the signal. Veblen was looking at the Gilded Age guys like Andrew Carnegie and Cornelius Vanderbilt. Men who built mansions they'd never fully live in, bought yachts they'd never really use, threw parties that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Not because they needed to, but because the display was the point. Here's the wild part. That was over 125 years ago, and the psychology hasn't changed. A 2023 study from the National Bureau of Economic Research looked at spending habits across 2,400 Americans with net worths between $500,000 and $2 million. What they found was pretty striking. The people with the highest financial anxiety weren't the ones spending less. They were the ones spending more on visible stuff. Cars, home upgrades, clothes, the things other people can see. The group with the lowest anxiety, they spent about 34% less on visible consumption. They held about 22% more in liquid assets. And most importantly, it wasn't accidental. They chose that. Think of it like this. A thermometer reacts to the temperature around it. A thermostat controls it. The quietly wealthy retiree isn't someone who gave things up. They're someone who stopped letting the outside world set the temperature inside their life. That's the frame to keep in your head for the rest of this. Subsection 1. What detachment actually is and isn't. Let's clear up the biggest misunderstanding right away. Detachment isn't frugality. It's not minimalism. It's not some monk on a mountain thing. And it's definitely not poverty with better branding. That retiree I mentioned earlier, he takes 2 vacations a year. He's got a wine collection. He dropped $300 a head at a restaurant last month. He just didn't post it. Didn't bring it up. Didn't need your reaction to complete the experience. That's the difference. Consumption without performance. Behavioral economists frame this as intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic means you do something because you genuinely want to. Extrinsic means you're doing it for how it looks to other people. Research out of the University of Rochester shows that people who shift from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation report, on average, a 41% increase in life satisfaction. Not a small bump, almost half. Now, here's where it hits your money. When your spending is extrinsic, it's elastic. It stretches to match the audience. You get a raise, your neighbor buys a new car, suddenly you need one too. You retire with $800,000 and feel like you have to look like someone with $800,000, so you upgrade, remodel, fly first class, just to signal you've arrived. And here's the trap. The audience never stops watching, so the spending never stops growing. When your spending is intrinsic, it stabilizes. It becomes predictable, tied to what you actually enjoy, not what people expect from you. And predictable spending. That's one of the most underrated retirement tools there is. Subsection 2, the hidden cost of performing wealth. Here's a number that'll stick with you. The average American between 55 and 64 spends about $67,000 a year. Out of that, Researchers from the Consumer Expenditure Survey estimate roughly 22%, around 14,700, goes to social signaling, cars beyond what you need, home upgrades driven by comparison, clothes and dining that follow the crowd more than your own taste, 14,700 a year. Over 20 years of retirement at about a 6% return, that's not just 294,000, it's over 540,000, $500,000 gone, not into experiences you truly cared about, but into an audience that wasn't paying nearly as much attention as you thought. And it's not just the money. Every time you spend to manage someone else's perception of you, you're running a transaction. And transactions have a cost. Mental load, low-level anxiety, that constant background question, am I doing enough? Do I look successful? Do they see it? The detached retiree doesn't run those transactions. Their mental bandwidth is free. And that's not just a metaphor. A 2021 study from the Journal of Financial Planning tracked cortisol, your stress hormone, over 18 months. Retirees with low social comparison had lower cortisol, better sleep, higher life satisfaction, and even lower healthcare usage. Detachment wasn't just a mindset. It showed up in the body. Subsection 3, how the wealthy actually signal status to themselves. So if they're not spending to impress people, what are they doing with the money? Good question. And this is where it flips. The consistent pattern among self-made, quietly wealthy retirees is that they redirect that performance budget into what researchers call private abundance, things that are deeply personal, mostly invisible, and impossible to compare. First one, time. Not just free time, controlled time. The ability to say no, cancel plans, spend a random Tuesday afternoon exactly how you want with zero obligation. Second, privacy. Not secrecy, privacy. They don't talk about money because talking invites opinions, requests, comparisons. Silence becomes a boundary. Third, optionality, liquidity, choices. That 200,000 sitting in a boring money market account, it's not lazy, it's leverage. It's walk-away power. Walk-away power changes everything. How you deal with a contractor, a car dealer, a financial advisor, even family. When you can walk away, you negotiate differently. And that changes the outcome every time. Subsection 4, why this doesn't happen by accident. Here's what surprises most people. This mindset doesn't just show up on its own. In The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel talks about interviewing dozens of quietly wealthy individuals. And there's a pattern. It wasn't passive. They weren't just born this way. Almost all of them could point to a moment, a turning point. Sometimes it was a close call, a market crash that nearly wiped them out. Sometimes it was watching someone else lose everything trying to look rich. Sometimes it was just one conversation that changed how they saw money. The point is, detachment is a skill. You can learn it, you can practice it, and the earlier you start, the more you protect. Let's make this personal, because all of this sounds nice in theory, but you've got a real life and real decisions to make. Scenario A, you're 58, still working, with around 400,000. This is where the pressure peaks. Retirement feels close enough to be real, but still far enough to feel uncertain. Look around. Some of your peers are retiring and talking about it nonstop. New RVs, golf memberships, posts about not setting an alarm anymore. Others are quietly stressed and masking it with spending. Here's what's happening in your head, whether you realize it or not. If I look like I've got it together, maybe I'll feel like I've got it together. So the new car, the kitchen remodel, the upgraded vacation, they don't feel like indulgences. They feel like reassurance. But here's what that reassurance costs you. At $400,000, with 7 years until retirement, if you cut about $12,000 a year in extrinsic spending, roughly $1,000 a month, and just let it grow at a conservative 5%, that's about $98,000 extra by 65. Almost $100,000. Not from picking better investments, just from plugging a leak you probably didn't even notice. Now here's the trap. I've earned this. I worked 30 years. I deserve it. That's true, you did earn it. But ask yourself one thing. Are you doing it for you or for someone else? If that question takes more than a couple seconds to answer, you already know. Scenario B. You're 64, recently retired, with around $750,000. Now the pressure changes. You're not trying to prove anything at work anymore. The audience shifts to your kids, your friends who are still working, and honestly, yourself. Retirement creates what psychologists call an identity vacuum. For 35 years, your identity was tied to your job. Now it's not. And into that empty space, spending can rush in. expensive hobbies you don't fully enjoy, home upgrades nobody really needed, trips that are more about having something to say at Thanksgiving than something you actually wanted to do. Here's what the math says. At $750,000, if you're pulling about $45,000 a year that's already pushing it a bit, and you add just $8,000 more annually from comparison-driven spending, your portfolio doesn't last to 91. It runs out around 81. That's a 10-year difference. 10 years of security traded for a remodel and a couple of first-class flights. The trap here is quieter. I've got enough. This doesn't really matter. But at 64, you don't know how long you'll live. You don't know what healthcare will cost. You don't know what the market's going to do over the next 15 years. What you do control is this. Is every dollar leaving your account going out because you chose it or because you felt like you had to show something to someone? So what do you actually do with all this? Here are 4 real steps, not vague ideas, actual moves you can make. Step 1, run a social comparison audit this week. Pull up your last 3 months of credit card and bank statements. Go line by line. Highlight anything where, if you're being honest, part of the reason you bought it was how it would look to someone else. Don't judge it, just mark it. Then add it up. Most people land somewhere between $800 and $2,000 a month. That number, that's your starting point. Step 2, label your spending before you make it. Every major purchase gets one of 2 labels. Intrinsic, I actually want this. I'd enjoy it even if nobody ever knew. Extrinsic part of this is how it looks to other people. You don't have to eliminate extrinsic spending, just make it conscious. Because once it's conscious, it drops. Across the board, studies show intentional spending is about 40% lower than unconscious spending. Step 3, add 1 private abundance expense. Pick something that costs real money and nobody sees. That's the rule. Could be a better mattress, a weekly massage, incredible coffee at home every morning, something that genuinely improves your life but signals nothing to anyone else. If it feels a little weird, spending money on something invisible, that's actually the point. You're retraining where your attention goes. Step 4, build a 90-day walkaway fund. Set aside 3 months of living expenses in cash, liquid, easy to access. This is not your emergency fund. This is your I can walk away fund. Bad contractor, you walk. Bad advisor, you walk. Bad situation, you're not stuck. And here's the thing, the psychological impact is way bigger than the number itself. People with a walkaway fund make better decisions. Not because they're smarter, but because they're not negotiating from fear anymore. So why doesn't anyone talk about this? Because detachment doesn't sell anything. The whole financial media world, ads, lifestyle content, influencers flexing their portfolio next to a Lamborghini, it all runs on one assumption, that you're performing. That wealth has to be seen. That making it means showing people you made it. But once you understand detachment, you become a terrible customer. You stop buying the car that signals success and start buying the one that just gets you where you need to go. You stop renovating to impress some future buyer you'll never meet and start shaping your space around how you actually live. And yeah, that's bad for a lot of industries. So those industries don't exactly fund content that teaches you this. The retirees who figure this out and they exist at every level, not just the ultra wealthy, they're not smarter than you. They just made one shift earlier. They stopped outsourcing their decisions to other people's opinions. Now you see how it works. You can spot the trap, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the shift. Here's what we covered. Detachment isn't about being cheap. It's not about giving things up. It's about separating your financial decisions from what other people expect of you. And the data is pretty clear. It protects your money, lowers your stress, and can stretch your retirement by 10 years or more. The retirees who get this right didn't just drift into it. They made a choice, usually after a moment where the cost of performing became impossible to ignore. You don't have to wait for that. If this shifted how you think about even one purchase you've been considering, drop a comment below. I read every single one. And the real question now isn't whether detachment is possible. It's whether you're willing to stop performing before the cost becomes obvious. Think about that. I'll see you in the next one.